The cruelest prison is the one that convinces you nobody is coming. Red dust rolled through the streets of Bazaar like waves across a dying sea. The wind carried the scent of machine oil, sun-baked stone, and overheated generators that had been running longer than anyone could remember. Above the crowded market, faded fabric canopies snapped and fluttered under the relentless desert gusts, casting shifting shadows over thousands of travelers moving through the narrow lanes. Merchants shouted from their stalls. Cargo drones hovered overhead carrying crates of imported goods. Somewhere in the distance, an old transport horn echoed across the settlement. Mason Walker barely noticed any of it. The 40-year-old human engineer had come to the desert world for one reason. His freighter needed a replacement fusion regulator, and Bazaar was famous for selling parts nobody else could find. He adjusted the strap of his worn utility bag and moved deeper into the market. His boots crunched against layers of dust that had accumulated over decades. Most stalls were exactly what he expected. Piles of scavenged machinery, crates of salvaged electronics, vendors promising impossible bargains. Nothing unusual, until he reached the oldest section of the bazaar. The crowd began thinning. The noise faded. The colorful banners disappeared. Even the sunlight seemed dimmer here. Mason slowed his pace. Something felt wrong. Then he saw the sign. It hung from a rusted chain attached to a weathered metal platform positioned against a sandstone wall. The lettering was faded but still readable. Nobody will buy her. Mason stopped walking. For a moment, he thought it was some kind of joke. Then his eyes shifted below the sign. A young alien woman sat quietly on the platform. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply stared at the ground while dust drifted around her feet. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver-purple hue beneath the desert light. Long white hair spilled over her shoulders like strands of pale metal. Her face was strikingly beautiful, yet unmistakably alien. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, glowing faintly gold beneath lowered lashes. Elegant ears, curved backward along the sides of her head, and delicate silver markings traced across her cheekbones like living starlight frozen beneath her skin. Several travelers glanced at her while passing by. None stopped. None spoke. Most looked away after only a second, as though they had already decided she was not worth noticing. A merchant standing nearby caught Mason staring. The older alien chuckled and crossed his arms. "You are wasting your time." Mason frowned. What happened to her? The merchant shrugged. "Nothing unusual. That sign says otherwise." Another shrug. People stop asking eventually. Mason looked back toward the girl. She remained motionless. The emptiness in her posture bothered him more than the sign itself. He had seen people exhausted before. He had seen people defeated before. This felt different. This looked like someone who had stopped expecting anything to change. The merchant followed his gaze. Nobody wants her. Why? Many reasons. Such as, no family, no connections, no value. The answer came too quickly, like something repeated many times before. Mason felt his jaw tighten. The merchant noticed and laughed softly. "Do not look at me like that, human. I did not make the rules." Mason ignored him. His attention remained fixed on the girl sitting beneath the sign. The desert wind swept through the alley again, lifting strands of her white hair across her face. For the briefest moment, her golden eyes lifted from the ground. Their gazes met. Mason expected anger, fear, resentment. Instead, he saw something far worse. Acceptance. The kind that comes after disappointment has lasted too long. The kind that settles into a person's soul and convinces them they have already been forgotten. Then she lowered her eyes again, as though even that brief moment of eye contact had been a mistake. And for reasons Mason could not yet explain, he suddenly found himself unable to walk away. The merchant eventually grew bored of waiting for Mason to leave. He leaned against a stack of weathered cargo crates and folded his arms. "You are still here." Mason kept his eyes on the young alien woman. "Looks that way. Most people walk away after 30 seconds. Maybe most people are in a hurry." The merchant laughed quietly. "Or maybe they understand there is nothing worth seeing." The words lingered in the dusty air. Mason glanced toward the sign hanging above the platform, then back toward the woman sitting beneath it. The longer he looked, the less sense the situation made. She was not causing trouble. She was not begging for attention. She was simply sitting there while an entire marketplace pretended she did not exist. "What is her name?" Mason asked. The merchant blinked. What? Her name? Why would that matter? Because everybody has one. The merchant shrugged. Not everybody remembers it. Something tightened in Mason's chest. He looked toward the woman again. Her golden eyes remained fixed on the ground. Dust drifted across the platform around her feet. Travelers continued passing through the alley without stopping. It was as if she had become part of the furniture. Another object people noticed only long enough to ignore. How long has she been here? Mason asked. Months. That is not an answer. Long enough. The merchant picked up a small tool from a nearby counter and examined it. She arrived with paperwork. She was transferred. Then transferred again. Then again. Nobody kept her for very long. Why? Ask them. Mason frowned. What did they say? Different reasons, every time. The merchant placed the tool down. Too quiet. Too strange. Too much trouble. Not useful enough. The alien woman did not react. Not a flinch. Not a glance. Nothing. That bothered Mason more than the explanations. He had spent most of his adult life around cargo crews, mechanics, and travelers. People complained. People argued. People got angry. Silence like this usually meant something had broken long ago. Hey, Mason said gently. The woman did not respond. Can you understand standard? A long pause followed. Then the slightest nod. Barely visible. Mason felt unexpectedly relieved. Good. The merchant rolled his eyes. You are wasting your breath. Mason ignored him. My name is Mason Walker. This time the woman looked up. Her eyes met his for only a second before drifting away again. But it was enough. He saw confusion there. Maybe even suspicion. As if introductions were no longer something she expected from strangers. What is your name? He asked. Silence. The wind moved through the alley once more. Somewhere overhead, loose metal panels rattled against an old support beam. Several seconds passed. Then several more. Mason was beginning to think she would not answer. Finally, her lips moved. The first attempt produced no sound. She swallowed and tried again. Soralia. The name came out almost as a whisper. Fragile. Careful. Like something that had not been spoken in a very long time. Mason smiled. Nice to meet you, Soralia. The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic. Just a small change in her expression. A crack in the wall she had built around herself. The merchant noticed it too. His amusement faded. For the first time all afternoon, he looked uneasy. And Soralia lowered her eyes again, as though she was afraid that hearing her own name might awaken memories she had spent years trying to bury. The merchant watched Soralia carefully after she spoke her name. Whatever discomfort had appeared on his face earlier was growing. Mason noticed. People who spent years around cargo contracts learned how to recognize nervous behavior. The merchant was trying very hard not to look at something. You know more than you are saying, Mason said. Everybody knows more than they say. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting. The older alien turned away and pretended to organize a collection of mechanical parts stacked beside his stall. The movement felt forced. Mason glanced back toward Soralia. She had wrapped her arms around herself again. Her golden eyes remained fixed on the platform beneath her feet. Something about her reaction to hearing her own name continued to bother him. How long has it been? He asked quietly. She looked up. What? Since somebody asked your name. A long silence followed. Travelers continued moving through the distant sections of the market. The sounds felt strangely far away now, like the rest of the bazaar existed in another world. Soralia frowned slightly, as if trying to calculate the answer. Finally she shook her head. I do not know. The honesty in her voice hurt more than any number could have. Mason exhaled slowly. That long, huh? She lowered her gaze again. People usually ask other questions. Like what? What I can do. Her fingers tightened slightly. Or what I am worth. Mason did not immediately reply. The desert wind swept through the alley once more, carrying fine dust across the platform. As it settled, something caught his attention. A faint shape partially hidden beneath the layer of sand. Mason stepped closer. At first he thought it was a scratch in the metal surface. Then he realized it was a symbol. Circular. Intricate. Deliberate. Thin lines spread outward from a central design that resembled a star surrounded by geometric patterns. The mark looked ancient. Far older than the platform itself. What is that? He asked. The merchant froze. Only for a second. But it was enough. Mason saw it clearly. Soralia saw it too. Her eyes widened. Nothing. The merchant said too quickly. Looks like something. Just an old maintenance marking. Mason crouched beside the platform. Years of engineering work had taught him the difference between functional designs and decorative ones. This symbol was neither random nor decorative. Every line appeared intentional, precise. Maintenance crews do not carve symbols like this. The merchant's jaw tightened. Leave it alone. That response immediately convinced Mason he was looking at something important. He brushed away more dust with the side of his hand. Additional lines emerged from beneath the surface. The pattern was larger than he first realized. Much larger. Soralia suddenly stood up. It was the first time Mason had seen her move with any urgency. Do not. Her voice came out sharper than before. Not angry. Afraid. Real fear flickered across her features. Mason looked up at her. You recognize it. She stared at the symbol without answering. The color seemed to drain from her face. Soralia? Her lips parted slightly. I have seen it before. The merchant closed his eyes as if something inevitable had just happened. Mason slowly stood. Where? Soralia's golden eyes remained fixed on the ancient mark. The wind died. The alley became strangely still. Then she whispered 4 words that immediately changed everything. In my dreams. The merchant looked away first. His earlier confidence had vanished completely. He no longer appeared annoyed by Mason's questions. He appeared worried. The distinction mattered. Mason had seen it before in dockmasters hiding contraband shipments and captains concealing damaged cargo manifests. People became uncomfortable when ordinary conversations wandered too close to dangerous truths. Dreams, Mason repeated. What kind of dreams? Soralia hesitated. Her golden eyes never left the symbol buried beneath the dust. I do not know. You just said you recognized it. I do. Her voice remained quiet. But every time I try to remember more, it disappears. The wind returned, sweeping another layer of fine red dust across the platform. For a moment, the ancient markings seemed to shimmer beneath the sand. Mason told himself it was only a trick of the light. Yet he could not shake the feeling that something about the symbol was waiting. The merchant abruptly stepped forward. Enough. Both of them looked at him. The market closes soon. He pointed toward the main avenue. Take your questions somewhere else. Mason folded his arms. Why? Because nothing good comes from discussing old things. That sounds specific. The merchant's expression tightened. Some things are forgotten for a reason. The answer only made Mason more curious. Before he could continue, a low electronic tone echoed through the alley. All 3 of them froze. The sound had not come from a nearby stall. It had come from the platform itself. The merchant went pale. Soralia took a step backward. Mason looked down. A faint line of silver light appeared within the symbol beneath the dust. Then another. Thin glowing pathways spread through the ancient design like veins awakening after a long sleep. What did you do? The merchant demanded. Me? Mason looked genuinely confused. I have been standing here. Another tone sounded. Slightly louder this time. Several nearby merchants poked their heads around corners, immediately noticing the glow. Uneasy whispers spread. Through the old section of the bazaar, Soralia stared at the platform in disbelief. Her silver markings seemed brighter somehow. Not glowing exactly. Responding. It has never done that before, she whispered. You are sure? Mason asked. She nodded. I have sat here for months. The light continued expanding through the symbol. Tiny particles of dust lifted from the platform as if disturbed by a field invisible to everyone else. The merchant hurried toward a storage crate and pulled out a handheld scanner. His fingers trembled as he activated it. Data flooded across the screen. Mason caught only fragments. Most of the text appeared in a language he did not recognize. Whatever he was reading caused the merchant's face to lose all remaining color. That is impossible, he muttered. What is? Mason asked. The merchant looked from the scanner to Soralia and then back again. This identifier should not exist anymore. Before Mason could demand an explanation, another sound echoed through the alley. Not from the platform. From somewhere beyond the marketplace. A distant notification chime. Then another. Then several more. Station-wide communication alerts. Travelers began checking wrist displays. Vendors pulled out datapads. Messages were spreading across the settlement. Fast. The merchant lowered the scanner. His eyes were fixed entirely on Soralia now. They know. A cold sensation settled in Mason's stomach. Who knows? The merchant swallowed hard. Whoever has been searching for her. The merchant's words seemed to drain the remaining warmth from the alley. Around them, more communication alerts echoed through the marketplace. Travelers stopped walking. Vendors checked their displays. Information was spreading faster than the desert wind. Mason looked toward the main avenue and noticed something unusual. People were beginning to look in their direction. Not casually, intentionally. Whatever signal had been triggered was no longer a private problem. Searching for her? Mason asked. Who? The merchant lowered the scanner slowly. I do not know anymore. That answer felt honest, which made it even more unsettling. The silver light beneath the platform continued to pulse at steady intervals. Each pulse illuminated more of the ancient symbol hidden beneath decades of dust. The design extended farther than Mason originally realized. Thin geometric patterns spread across the entire platform surface, forming a network of interconnected lines. It looked less like decoration and more like a map. Aurelia stared at it with growing unease. I remember a room, she whispered. Mason turned toward her. What kind of room? She pressed a hand against her temple. Bright walls, white stone, a ceiling full of stars. Her breathing became slightly uneven. There were people there. Your family. She closed her eyes. Maybe. The uncertainty in her voice made it clear that the memory was incomplete. Fragments. Pieces of something larger. The merchant checked the scanner again. New symbols were appearing across the display. Suddenly, a sharp tone sounded from the device. The merchant flinched. Mason stepped closer. What does it say? The merchant hesitated. Then he reluctantly turned the screen. Most of the text remained unreadable, but one line had translated automatically into standard. Legacy identifier confirmed. Mason frowned. What does that mean? The merchant looked toward Aurelia. It means somebody spent a great deal of effort making sure nobody would ever find her. Silence settled over the alley. Aurelia lowered her gaze. The statement did not surprise her. Somehow that was the most disturbing part. You knew? Mason said quietly. She shook her head. Not exactly. Then what did you know? Her fingers tightened slightly. Only that people became nervous whenever certain questions were asked. Questions about what? Where I came from. Another pulse of silver light spread across the platform. This time the glow climbed briefly along the edge before fading again. Several nearby merchants immediately backed away. One closed his stall entirely. Another hurried into a side street without saying a word. Fear was spreading. Not panic. Recognition. As if older residents of the bazaar understood something younger generations did not. Then a new sound echoed from above. A deep vibration rolled through the station. Structure. Mason recognized it immediately. Docking engines. Large ones. He looked toward the sky visible between sections of the market roof. Multiple ships were descending toward the settlement. Too many to be a coincidence. The merchant saw them too. They are already here. Who? Mason asked again. The merchant swallowed. The people who never stopped looking. Before Mason could respond, the scanner emitted one final chime. New text appeared across the screen. This time, even the merchant looked stunned. His eyes widened as he read the translation. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he lifted the display toward them. Mason read the message once. Then again, searching for additional survivors. The words hung in the air. Aurelia stared at them in silence. Then, for the first time since meeting her, genuine shock appeared on her face. Because the message revealed something none of them had expected. Whatever she was, she might not be the last. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The marketplace continued moving around them, yet the alley felt strangely disconnected from the rest of the world. Searching for additional survivors. The message remained on the scanner display like a challenge to everything Aurelia thought she knew. Her golden eyes never left the screen. That cannot be right, she whispered. The merchant looked equally unsettled. The system does not make mistakes. Every system makes mistakes. Not this one. Mason watched the exchange carefully. The more answers appeared, the more questions followed. What exactly is this system? Neither of them answered immediately. Another pulse of silver light spread across the platform beneath their feet. This time the glow lingered longer. Thin lines extended from the central symbol, forming new patterns that had been hidden beneath the dust. The design no longer resembled a simple marking. It looked like part of something much larger. Aurelia stared at it. Her breathing slowed. Her expression changed. I remember another piece. Mason turned toward her. What do you remember? She closed her eyes. The sounds of the bazaar seemed to fade around her. A hall. Her voice was distant. Very large. White stone. Thousands of lights above me. She pressed a hand against her forehead. There were people standing beside me. Your people? She nodded uncertainly. I think so. The silver markings beneath her skin shimmered faintly. Someone was speaking. What were they saying? Sorelia frowned, as if trying to hold onto a fading dream. They kept repeating the same words. Her eyes opened slowly. The gates must remain free. The merchant inhaled sharply. Mason noticed. You recognize that? The older alien looked away. Everybody knows the legend. Then tell me. The merchant hesitated before speaking. Long before the modern colonies existed, there were stories about a civilization that connected thousands of worlds. He glanced toward the glowing symbol. The stories claimed they used pathways that made distance meaningless. Stargates, Mason said. A myth. The merchant replied automatically, though his voice lacked conviction. Above the station, another deep vibration rolled through the sky. More ships were arriving. Through gaps in the market roof, navigation lights flashed across the darkening evening. The settlement was becoming crowded very quickly. Sorelia looked upward. Fear had returned to her expression. They are coming because of me. Mason shook his head. They are coming because of whatever this is. He pointed toward the platform. You did not create it. No. Her voice was barely audible. But it recognized me. The statement hung heavily between them. Suddenly the scanner emitted a new sequence of tones. Different from before. Faster. The merchant stared at the display. His eyes widened. What now? Mason asked. The merchant slowly turned the screen toward them. A star map had appeared. Most of it was dark, except for a single point of light glowing near the outer edge. The translation rendered automatically beneath it. Verified legacy holder detected. Location unknown. Sorelia's hand rose to her mouth. Mason read the message twice to make sure he understood it. Then he looked at her. The realization struck both of them at the same time. Somewhere out there, beyond the deserts, beyond the station, beyond everything they could see, another person had just been found. And for the first time in years, Sorelia was no longer alone. The discovery changed the atmosphere instantly. Until now, the mystery had belonged to Sorelia alone. Now it belonged to someone else as well. Somewhere beyond the horizon of known space, another legacy holder existed. Another survivor. Another person connected to whatever civilization had vanished from history. Sorelia continued staring at the glowing point on the scanner. Her golden eyes reflected the tiny light like a distant star. I thought I was the last one, she whispered. The merchant slowly lowered the device. Perhaps that was the point. Mason looked at him. What does that mean? The older alien exhaled heavily. If people believe they are alone, they stop looking. Before Mason could press further, movement appeared at the entrance to the alley. Several figures wearing dark travel coats stepped into view. They were not armed. They were not threatening. Yet their arrival immediately drew attention from everyone nearby. Conversations stopped. Vendors grew quiet. Even the wind seemed to lose its voice. The newcomers studied the glowing platform, then Sorelia. One of them stepped forward. A tall woman with silver-gray skin and calm amber eyes. We received the signal, she said. Her voice was polite but careful. We would like to speak with the legacy holder. Sorelia visibly tensed. Mason noticed and instinctively shifted slightly closer to her. The woman's gaze moved toward him. You are the human who activated the identifier? I did not activate anything. Nevertheless, events appear to have started when you arrived. Mason could not argue with that. The timing was difficult to ignore. The woman glanced toward the symbol beneath the platform. Remarkable. Her expression revealed genuine surprise. We believed all remaining gateways were dormant. The merchant laughed nervously. Apparently not. Another vibration rolled through the station. More ships arriving. More visitors responding to the signal. The silver-gray woman checked a wrist display and frowned. We do not have much time. Sorelia finally spoke. Why is everyone searching for us? The question carried years of uncertainty behind it. The woman studied her carefully before answering. Because history was incomplete. That is not an answer. It is the truth. She looked toward the glowing map still forming on the scanner. The records described a lost civilization. They described stargates. They described pathways connecting thousands of worlds. What they never explained was who maintained them. Sorelia's expression changed. Something clicked into place. A memory. A realization. The caretakers, she whispered. The woman's eyes widened slightly. You remember that? Cerelia pressed a hand against her chest. More fragments were returning now. The gates were not owned. Her voice trembled. They were protected. The silver-gray woman nodded slowly. Exactly. Silence followed. Mason looked between them. The pieces were finally beginning to align. The ancient network. The hidden identifiers. The erased records. Somebody had not merely forgotten this civilization. Somebody had deliberately removed it from history. Another alert appeared on the scanner. This time the glowing point representing the second survivor brightened dramatically. New coordinates began streaming across the display. Every person in the alley leaned forward. Then a final message appeared beneath the marker. Contact attempt initiated. Cerelia stared at the words in disbelief. Somewhere out there, another survivor had just answered. No one breathed while the message remained suspended above the scanner. Contact attempt initiated. The words seemed impossible. For years, perhaps decades, the legacy network had been silent. Now it was reaching across the stars towards someone who should not have existed. Cerelia stared at the glowing marker as though afraid it might disappear if she blinked. Around them, the alley had become crowded. Merchants, travelers, officials, and curious onlookers filled every nearby doorway. Yet nobody spoke above a whisper. The silver-gray woman slowly raised her wrist display. The signal is stabilizing. Mason glanced at the screen. Meaning what? Meaning this is not an automated response. Her voice carried genuine amazement. Someone is answering. The platform beneath Cerelia's feet pulsed again. Silver light spread through the ancient symbol, brighter than before. The glowing pathways expanded outward and began projecting a faint holographic image above the platform. Tiny points of light appeared in the air. Stars. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. A map unfolded above the alley. Entire trade routes appeared where modern charts showed empty space. The crowd collectively stepped closer. Cerelia's eyes widened. Another memory surfaced. She could feel it. I know this, she whispered. I have seen it before. Mason looked at her. Where? She stared into the floating constellation. When I was young. Her voice trembled. Someone showed me how the routes connected worlds together. More fragments returned. A vast chamber. White stone. Countless stars projected overhead. Voices speaking about responsibility rather than ownership. The silver-gray woman watched carefully. The caretakers. Cerelia nodded slowly. The gates belonged to everyone. The woman closed her eyes. Then the records were true. Another notification flashed across the scanner. The distant marker brightened again. New data streamed across the display. Coordinates. Archives. Historical references. Information long believed lost. The merchant looked stunned. This changes everything. Mason frowned. Everybody keeps saying that. Because it does. The merchant pointed toward the star map. Do you understand what this means? Entire regions of space may become accessible again. Several nearby officials immediately began exchanging nervous glances. Cerelia noticed. For the first time, something became clear. They were not afraid of her. They were afraid of what she represented. Not wealth. Not power. Access. The ability to reconnect worlds that history had separated. The realization settled heavily in her chest. All those years spent being ignored. Forgotten. Passed from place to place. None of it happened because she was worthless. It happened because somebody wanted her hidden. The thought was both terrifying and strangely freeing. Mason looked at her. What are you thinking? Cerelia kept her eyes on the stars. I think they were never trying to erase me. Then what? Her golden eyes reflected the ancient map overhead. They were trying to erase what I remembered. Before Mason could respond, the holographic network suddenly shifted. One section of the map brightened. A second marker appeared beside the first. Then a third. The scanner emitted a rapid sequence of tones. The silver-gray woman looked down and immediately froze. Slowly, she turned the display toward them. The translation appeared automatically. Additional legacy holders detected. Search expanding. Cerelia stared at the words in disbelief. Moments earlier, she had discovered she was not alone. Now the network was suggesting something even more impossible. There might be many more. The alley remained illuminated by the floating star map long after the newest markers appeared. No one seemed willing to leave. Merchants who normally worried about profit stood silently beside travelers who had forgotten where they were going. Every eye remained fixed on the ancient network hanging above them. Additional legacy holders detected. Search expanding. The words echoed through Ceralia's mind. For years she had believed she was a mistake, an unwanted remnant of a forgotten past. A person passed from one owner to another until even her own memories began to fade. Now the truth stood before her in silver light. She had never been abandoned because she was worthless. She had been hidden because she was important. The realization felt strange. Not triumphant. Not glorious. Just sad. So many years had been lost. Mason watched her quietly. He did not say anything at first. He simply stood beside her while the crowd whispered around them. Eventually, Ceralia looked at him. Everything is changing. Mason followed her gaze toward the stars. Looks that way. People will come looking for me. Probably. They will want answers. Definitely. Ceralia lowered her eyes. I do not know if I have them. Mason smiled slightly. Neither does anyone else. The simple response surprised a small laugh out of her. It was soft and brief, but it was the first genuine laugh she had shared all day. The silver-gray woman noticed it. So did the merchant. Both seemed strangely relieved. Another notification appeared across the scanner. More signals. More distant responses. More evidence that the lost civilization had not disappeared entirely. Somewhere across the galaxy, other caretakers were awakening. Other stories were beginning. Yet for the first time, Ceralia did not feel overwhelmed by the future. She felt anchored to the present. The platform beneath her feet emitted one final pulse of light. Then the ancient symbol slowly dimmed. The star map remained overhead, but the activation sequence had ended. Its purpose was fulfilled. The network had found her, and she had found proof that she was not alone. Around them, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Officials hurried away to make reports. Merchants reopened their stalls. Travelers resumed their journeys. Life moved forward. Mason glanced toward the weathered sign still hanging from its rusted chain. Without a word, he stepped forward and removed it. The metal creaked softly as he lowered it from the platform. Nobody objected. Nobody stopped him. He carried it to a nearby wall and leaned it against the stone. There it remained, half covered in drifting dust, a relic from a story that no longer belonged to the present. Ceralia stared at it for several seconds. Then she looked toward the stars visible through the opening above the bazaar. Somewhere out there were answers. Somewhere out there were others like her. Entire worlds might soon rediscover parts of their history. Yet the moment she would remember most was not the activation of an ancient network or the revelation of a lost civilization. It was a simple question asked by a tired human engineer in a dusty marketplace. What is your name? Sometimes the greatest discoveries in the galaxy did not begin with advanced technology or forgotten gates. Sometimes they began when one person chose to see another person as worthy of being remembered.